Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we'll be talking about the Bitcoin price chart as we try to work our way out of this ABC correction and get our way on into an expansion. So, we'll talk about some of the recovery structures as we try to get our way out of here. As you've probably noticed, the tweets over there on X continuing to repeat, you are still not bullish enough on your altcoins. As you guys know, one of the most important things for the cryptocurrency market is to see that macro is behaving. Obviously, we're still waiting on a bigger move to come out of the Russell 2000. However, today we've got a brand new high for the S&P 500. We also have a new all-time high this week for the Nasdaq. Yesterday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed above its last retracement level. Today, continuing higher, up nearly 500 points as I'm recording this morning. Meanwhile, gold continues to be lackluster after doing 5 waves with a parabola to end itself off and still just lost most of its energy. So, of course, when we look at these things on the bigger perspective of the cryptocurrency market, what are the things that we're always looking for? We're looking for some type of breadth opening to be happening in the equity markets. We need to see a bullish equity market. We need to see gold totally petered out. And of course, it's always helpful to have structural setups as well at the same time. So while I don't know if the cryptocurrency market's going to take off today, tomorrow, a week, 2 weeks from now, what I could say is a lot of the conditions are starting to line up that are very favorable for it. It does still seem like it's lacking the spark to like ignite things. And we can see that represented here in the Russell, where it's not like something huge is happening in the Russell, although it's continuing to grind up. But I don't believe that's going to last forever. I think it could really just kind of show up at any moment. And I think a lot of that is probably being dictated and the story is being scripted over here, and however Bitcoin's going to go through this recovery phase before it can get itself into an actual expansion to come in here to push it above the previous all-time high set back there on May 23rd. Now, of course, we've looked at all of these different types of ABCs of how these corrections happen, where we'll set a new high, another high attempts, and then it fails and corrects. It shoots its way back up to the high, then we ABC. Really, these are all the exact same thing, and of course, the same thing, and then we shift into the ABC. Next is, how do we get into our recovery to eventually go into an expansion to shoot our way out? And so that's what we're all waiting for right in here on Bitcoin right now. So zooming in on all of these, what we could see is we do not have a situation where it's like, here's how it behaves practically every time, which is different from what we've had in here, because these tend to behave almost the same every single time. And that's kind of what made the last 4 months of just sticking to the exact same script of backup ABC, because that's really just almost what happens every single time. But it's not necessarily true once we actually finish the C leg on whether or not it's going to go ahead and bull flag immediately and then go into expansion, or if it's going to waddle in here first, like so, before it ends up going into the bull flag and then expanding. Now, what provides favorable conditions to say, man, it feels like a ticking time bomb that it should be expanding soon? Well, simply put, Coinbase already escaped from there. We can go back through the history of the Coinbase chart versus Bitcoin, and well, we really just move right on cue of whatever's happening in here. Any type of delay that's ever happened in here is usually just a couple of days of a delay, but this thing has already skyrocketed out of here after performing an ABC correction. Really just churning along with Bitcoin as it typically does, right? But this thing has already obviously escaped. So it's difficult to say which one will happen, but you try to look, for me, I try to look to macro and say, are we getting a clue from macro? And well, the asset that we typically follow is Coinbase, and Coinbase has already skyrocketed out. And well, here in these last couple of days, we've had these major indexes breaking through their all-time highs, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average being able to crack through its last retracement level. So what is it probably waiting on? Everybody's favorite. It's waiting for this thing to kind of make a major move, right? It's probably waiting on the Russell 2000 to really open its way up. But it's hard to say that's not coming. It feels like it's very close. I'd love to come on here and tell you, yeah, there's something building up in here that automatically means it's going to break out of here pretty soon. You would think so. Like, let's be realistic. You would think so. If you have the S&P, the Nasdaq, and Coinbase breaking out right now, you would totally think that, because they're typically tied. At least with Coinbase, it's definitely tied. But while we're here, of course, you just kind of have to be mindful about this, but maintaining that bigger picture perspective of like, well, it's probably coming. And all it's going to take is really just a crack of this thing over here on the Russell. And so, as we get ready to wrap up the week, as we really get ready to wrap up the month of June here, June 30th will be on Monday. This is probably typically going to be the key level here for the Russell 2000. It really feels like one of those moments where like a lot of things are really lining up in the market right now when it comes to these indexes and stock performance like the S&P, the Dow, and the NASDAQ. The Russell, in a sense, is not being left behind. We're just kind of waiting for that triggering event to happen. And I think it will happen. And I think it's really just like one of those moments that we kind of typically always see. Things are really lining up everywhere. The conditions are starting to get favorable. All there is like a spark missing. And it's kind of one of those things of like keeping your eyes out for what that spark might end up being. Typically, maybe some type of surprise. I don't know if it's going to end up being that bill getting passed or if it's going to be something else that ends up being the surprise. The last time we saw like an expansionary move in the cryptocurrency market was once we got through the election. There was a lot of uncertainty and unknowns as we got to the election. Then the election happened. Then the market expanded. Maybe there's that same type of thing going on there with this bill to get it passed and over the finish line. Or could be something else completely random that shows up and unexpected to the market where it suddenly just becomes risk on. But, with seeing the slowing down of gold, the ramping up of these indexes, the completion of the ABC over here on Bitcoin, we are still left with these questions on how this recovery will happen, but things are getting very favorable macro-wise that we're looking for. And there's been leaders to lead. So I sometimes think to myself of how certain things have to kind of happen and like what you're really looking for, right? And in my mind, it's not that I really ever scripted it to kind of play out like that. That like, I did think that we would do something along the lines like this. And then we'd end up having an ABC and that we weren't going to be able to enter into the fun time of the market until we got through the ABC. And then once the bull flag would show up, that we could eventually expand, right? So I've talked about that, and it feels like dozens of YouTube videos and in my newsletters that the fun time doesn't show up until we can get to that moment, right? Until we can get through the ABC and get into the bull flag, then the fun can happen, right? But it's like, well, what do you really need to actually see happen in order for the fun to really happen? Well, we can't just like ignore all the other things that we've talked about throughout the past. Those things all still remain true. Like, what do you have to have? You have to have the stock market breaking out. You have to have gold be weak, right? And so we get through the ABC, and then as the ABC ends, Coinbase, the asset that we typically follow, skyrockets. The S&P and the NASDAQ set new all-time highs, and gold's weak, all while we're right here. And so it's like the universe all coming together and doing what it's supposed to be doing. The thing we just haven't seen happen yet in the crypto market is for it to follow along. But in these environments, it's when it typically does. So it's exciting. That's why I don't have a problem posting right now. You're not bullish enough on your altcoins because the conditions are there. We've done the ABC, and then now the things are happening in macro markets that typically happen in order for us to eventually break out. So I'm excited. I'm just not really certain on how long this thing is going to take to kind of play out in here, but it sure feels like it could not take long. But we're just going to have to sit here and wait on it. And of course, things like XRP, this range that's been going on here since May, fully believe it'll all take part. And it'll happen when all assets are behaving together, because there's always narratives on what it is that's going to send XRP skyrocketing, but it always tends to do the same thing. It's got to be in the conditions being favorable for the market, right? And so, some of them are starting to happen when you have the S&P and the NASDAQ breaking out, and then you have Coinbase going, right? The next thing, of course, is getting Bitcoin to be able to follow along. And then, of course, you end up getting XRP being able to follow along. And so it's all this like chain reaction of events that we're trying to get happen here for this to be able to occur. And so you should all know by now, I don't own a tremendous amount of Bitcoin when it comes to a percentage of my portfolio. It's massively weighted XRP. But we talk about Bitcoin a lot, right? And it's because we look at the whole big picture of it all and how that all ties together and how it all occurs and the order of operations and the events that occur. And we look at the Russell and we look at the S&P and we look at gold, but it's all tying back to like, when can this thing pump? And it's having all those conditions be favorable to skyrocket Bitcoin and to skyrocket XRP at the exact same time. And it's not whatever narrative you can come up with. It's always these same things. So, the blue obviously being XRP. So Right now, obviously, the thing to pay attention to is expansion here in Bitcoin and over here in the Russell 2000. We have multiple things triggering positively in here. We've already got the ABC done there on Bitcoin. We've already got the S&P and the NASDAQ and the new highs. Now it's trying to get the very last couple of things to go for it. And then it just becomes unequivocal to have to write the tweet and just say, XRP, it is time you may send, right? But with how many times this has been put on the screen and how many times we've talked about that right there, did you ever think to yourself that the universe would line itself up to be right there? And when it was right there, that would happen or that would happen? So it's hard not to be an optimist right now, especially when we get the sea leg and then off to the races goes the stock market. Doesn't feel like it's too far away. So we'll keep our eyes on it next week. I hope that you guys all have an absolutely wonderful weekend. Keep your eyes peeled for Monday morning when the next newsletter does get published over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. This most recent one has a 22-minute audio voiceover recording with it. I personally record all of these after I write them. You can also check out bcbacker.com with over 40 videos and 11 hours of content teaching you how to set up your own charts and indicators within TradingView and CoinTrader Pro. There are links within the description of this video to blockchainbacker.substack.com for the newsletter and, of course, to bcbacker.com. Otherwise, have an absolutely fantastic weekend, and I'll check in with you guys next week. But that's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice, and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.